Adam Breihan is a housing counselor, a researcher, and an activist living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is his hometown. He's been active in the anti-war movement in Milwaukee and in Madison, where he attended school. In Madison, he's also participated in student and community groups focusing on labor issues and immigrant rights. Since the recent upsurge in political activity, he and other activists have shifted their focus to the fight for the public sector. Working both in Milwaukee and Madison, Adam has been involved in the movement in both cities against Governor Walker's union busting agenda. And Adam is also a member of Solidarity.
Okay, so I'm out of my element here because I don't have a printer and I have my laptop, which I put notes on. So please bear with me. I'm going to try to make this work. So first of all, thank you for inviting us up here. I mean, this has really been a fantastic experience for myself, and I'm sure Andrew too, to come up here, kind of get a weekend away from Wisconsin for a moment, and to really have an opportunity to reflect on what just happened and sort of assess what our strengths and weaknesses have been up to this point. So Andrew and I, over the past couple of days, have had some really incredible conversations about what's happened. We've also had conversations with folks here to see what's going on here and where the fight back is, going to continue in other places, and it's been really inspiring for us both, I think. So let me start by just saying, I've been in various activist causes for a while now in Wisconsin. I'm born and raised in Wisconsin. I've never lived anywhere else, and the past 2 months have really established a new reference point for me. Okay, I mean, I can't even begin. I could go on and on tonight about the teachable moments and learning experiences that we've had out there, but that could get boring. So I'm going to try to pick out a few. So anyway, I want to begin with an idea that Andrew kind of laid out there at the end, and just that the need that we saw out there for self-organization of the working class, and not just unions, and not just public sector unions for this fight back, but public sector and private sector together, and public and private sector with non-union workers together, and all workers together with community groups. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we need to see. We didn't really have that infrastructure going into this like we obviously would have liked, and that's something that we're navigating through now, as Andrew just said. But I want to say, though, and so we also, of course, need independent spaces for that to happen. I want to get into that in a minute. But I do just want to hit again this point that the working class was not asleep, and that's what this moment really taught me more than anything. Because a lot of times I kind of fell into that idea that we're all asleep. I kind of just, in many ways, it was set on this idea that most of my life I was going to be organizing and not the right historical period, and that I'm done with that line of thinking now. Okay, we can make the historical period. We just have to see when the openings are happening. So anyway, this has been an opportunity for rank and file union members, non-union workers, community activists alike to not just the political left, to really recognize and address the need for self-organization and developing these independent spaces. We've been able to build a great deal of new relationships that we haven't been able to in the past, and we've really been able to carve out a space, new spaces, and hammer out strategy in new ways. It's reminded us that the working class is alive and kicking. I really like thinking in the terms of anecdotes, so I'm going to just tell a quick one. I hope I don't go too long on this, but on the night that I'm sure many of you kind of followed what's been going on, but the night that the Senate, got together and got into the committee and passed, kind of did that sneak attack on us, and passed the bill. I was in Milwaukee at that moment. I wasn't out in Madison where they stormed the Capitol and whatnot. And throughout all this, the level of activism in Milwaukee has been very limited in comparison with Madison. I mean, it has something to do with the fact that we're an hour and a half away, and most people have been going up to Madison, but it's been a different scene. But I went out to where I heard that a picket was forming outside of our county courthouse there in Milwaukee, and a group that started at 200 people, and became 500 and 700, probably 1,000, kept on growing and growing. Well, I was there and I met up with a few teachers, a few people that I recognized from high school and some of their friends and colleagues. We was kind of chatting with them about what their plan was, what their TDA strategy was the day after, what were they going to do? Had they talked about that? And they were anxiously sitting by their cell phones and waiting for the word, from Mary Bell, the president of WEAC, Wisconsin Education Association Council, to see if she was going to call for a strike. Were they going to take militant tactics? Were they going to do something new, something different, or just remain inactive? Well, the word came through, and Mary Bell says, "Teachers, we want you to go to school tomorrow." Well, my old math teacher from high school looks at the phone, looks up, and says, "F that!" Just yells it out, blurts it out, and they immediately start out there on this picket line. They kind of start caucusing in a corner. Teachers get together, they start pulling people in, and they say, "Hey, come over here. Can you call some of your folks from your school? Let's get people together. What are we going to do?" And they start looking to direction for some of the organizers within their group, and they say, well, we have to meet. This is at 9:30 at night at this point. And anyway, they start making calls, and they demand the MTEA, the local Milwaukee Public School Teachers Union, they demand that their union president open up the building at 10 p.m. so that they can have a meeting, a discussion of what they're going to do tomorrow. And those teachers went out the next day. Okay, they found So those are the kind of experiences that we're seeing every day. I mean, I could go through many of them, but it brings up some questions about self-organization. I mean, first of all, what are people prepared to do? How do we connect people and movements that don't normally interact? People, are struggling every day as working class people, but how do we make that collective struggle? When the struggle began in Wisconsin, it really opened up this new space, a space that definitely had not been there in the past. And with that new opportunity for building relationships, we really ran with it, and now we have to solidify it. So anyway, the question of spontaneity. Well, I want to, as Andrew kind of touched on this, but, originally what AFL-CIO and WEAC planned for was, these 2 days of rallies, Tuesday and Wednesday in the middle of the week, where there would be 2 rallies, one AFL-CIO and one WEAC each day, and then throughout the rest of the day, lobbying. They had this idea that, we can convince a couple of Republican senators, they're not really, going to go forward with this. This is them kind of using scare tactics to kind of make us give up more concessions. And so they think, there was this idea mainly centered around, lobbying, giving testimony, and rallying. There was a joint finance committee where people were giving testimony about what the effects of this bill would be. Anyway, the militant tactics that you all saw, though, from TV, and reading on the internet, of us occupying the Capitol, of us having sit-ins, of us, continually having a presence outside the Capitol every day, those tactics they followed the particular circumstances of the situation. And I want to just kind of say, that, they weren't part of the plan. And so in that case, this certainly was spontaneous in that sense. But because of that, there's no reason to really fetishize the idea of this occupation of the Capitol. I mean, it was of course important to the movement and as a symbol of its strength, but it developed because of a particular set of needs and conditions at the time. We wanted to keep these hearings going as long as possible to buy us all time. When we realized that we could continue to hold that space far long into the night, people started talking hey, maybe we should just sleep here. Maybe we should get some sleeping bags in here. Maybe we should get some food and water. We're in for the long haul. And people just started talking amongst themselves, and suddenly, well, shit, we're sleeping on the marble floor, And that's how that developed. And when that started, we realized the need for these creative and new tactics. And with a sense of urgency, people knew that lobbying wasn't going to do the trick this time. They started realizing what the new power that they had in holding this space. It was of course symbolic, and as our government was trying to ram through this this piece of just heinous legislation without any like real, democratic process. We held the main central government building for our state. And I mean, that certainly had a great deal of symbolic power for us, but more importantly, I mean, it became an independent organizing space. I mean, sure, we eventually were surrounded by cops 24/7, but hey, we were able to have conversations with folks, real rank and file discussions about strategy and tactics that, I mean, in this sort of like this operating under this accelerated social time, I mean, we were able to have conversations with people. Students were able to sit down, students were able to sit down and talk with community activists, people that they had not been coordinating with before. Iron workers were saying they're talking tactics with teachers, Non-union workers were, convening meetings with ASME members and firefighters and so on. I mean, people started getting creative and bringing their social experiences and culture into that space. And really a new culture started developing in that building over the two, how many days were we in there now? I lose track, but over the time that we were in that building, I mean, people really became attached to this space and new types of organizing happened, many incredible political discussions. So the developing, broadening, and refining of people's like class consciousness in that space was really quite astounding, I would say. And so that became like a new, independent organizing space for us, and we realized like the infrastructure that simply wasn't there up to that point. I mean, we realized who wasn't talking with one another, like who, and how could we start bridging those gaps? People started meeting and having like political assemblies in the middle of the night. We woke up in the morning and we started having like open mics and kind of Q&A discussions with different folks that came in for the day, and a lot of great organizing started coming out of that. And it also allowed us to really be where the action was, I mean, when we saw that the Senate was going back into committee meetings, people rushed up there and they started getting on their phones and texting people and discussing with other folks to, get there. And with that, I mean, sense of, with that sense of urgency, I mean, people really felt like committed to throw down and start using these more militant tactics. But a lot of problems obviously came out of that space too. And one of them was, this infrastructure question. I mean, the unions, AFL-CIO leadership, they really didn't have much of a presence in that building. I mean, they were really committed to this lobbying and rally strategy. So they had these very large rallies outside. Just about every day for a while, but they weren't inside, they weren't part of that sort of space. So then the problem was like, where was the leadership? I mean, what groups were in charge? Nobody was in charge. I mean, so there was sort of this power vacuum that we were constantly dealing with, and a lot of things, militant moments. I mean, we had to sit in outside of the Senate, out of the Senate, right? With an incredible group of people. We had iron workers pushed up to the front, and they started blocking off an elevator to make sure that some of these legislative aides and senators couldn't sneak their way in. And we started sending people upstairs and blocking off every entrance we could possibly find. And I mean, suddenly we had a few hundred people sitting down, teachers, students, everybody. But then folks came in, folks that kind of like assumed some sort of role of leadership and said, well, no, the governor's about to have a press conference, like let's go over here. And before any of us could even react, suddenly like 75–80% of the people that were there are gone, and the senators like sneak out. Like our whole tactic at that moment was derailed because we really didn't have a clear infrastructure there. So we need to, at this point, really start, pulling on these relationships that we've built and start building new structures and organizations. Something that I'd really like to talk to all of you about the Toronto's Workers' Assembly to us is really like a model that I think we'd like to emulate in Madison, Wisconsin. Hopefully we can talk about some of the lessons that you all have learned. So anyway, it played a role, the Capitol occupation, and after a while we kind of realized that this tactic wasn't really working for us. But it wasn't really working because of the new circumstances that presented themselves. And now we're kind of at this point you know, where we are constantly having like conversations about strategy versus tactics. I mean, what is next? I mean, there's been tons of conversation about general strikes, and to me personally, I think those were helpful as sort of like an agitational piece at the beginning. But at this point, we've kind of realized that we seriously just don't have the infrastructure for that right now to really pull that off. And so we're kind of trying to like open up that playbook again and you know, review old chapters of what people have done in the past, but then also start to create new ones. You know, we're trying to write some new chapters here, okay? And we've really got to work between, you know, the movements here in Wisconsin, here in Toronto, and all the other states that Andrew mentioned before, and start to, you know, expand that playbook. You know, I really like thinking about this too, in this analogy that one of the comrades in Milwaukee mentioned, is this idea that, you know, we started in this river, and it grew larger and larger and larger, and now we've kind of gotten to this point where after this bill passed through, I mean, we're standing at a delta, you know, and it's starting to spread off in all these different directions. And obviously, we really hope that's leading to an ocean, okay? I mean, we don't want this to pitter-patter off into streams. We've got recall efforts going on, you know, and I personally have been involved in the recall efforts. My assessment of that is obviously I believe that Democratic Party will probably try to rein that in at some point, but at this point, this is yet another independent space that's opening up. I mean, we're talking about within unions, what we need to be doing right now is having this new member-to-member strategy of people talking with, talking with fellow members and starting to actually get the organization functioning as a whole, not just like this dependency on the leadership to kind of go in and do the arbitration and do the daily stuff for us, but actually having a cohesive and actively working organization. Well, the thing is like, in America, the working class is not, I mean, much of the working class, they're not union members, right? And so how do we start thinking about these member-to-member organizational models for folks like me? I mean, I'm not a union member, and I am part of the working class. So, I mean, I think that at this point, it's been kind of empowering for a lot of people. There's this new space that's opened up. And we're able to, you know, share experiences and once again connect with new people and start to build those new coalitions, start to get people keyed in ways that we actually might be able to have that infrastructure for further activities. I guess the one thing that I'll end with is, you know, this isn't about like being there and being right all the time. It's not about like, you know, being there to bear witness or anything. I mean, we really need to actively think about the role of confidence building, and we need to win, you know, like we really need to win, okay? So we need to think about like, not in our strategy, we need to think about like places where we can actually pinpoint ways that we can get gains, you know, where can we win? Where can we make a positive step in the direction that we need to be going towards? This is part of a much larger neoliberal program. This isn't just one bill, this isn't just one in one state. This is a much larger scale thing, and we need to start thinking about all of our tactics, all of our fight backs as part of a much larger movement. So I guess I'll end on that, and thanks for your time.